So, guys, I want to talk a little bit about AEW, and I do want to mention that I don't feel Darby Allin's title run has really helped out the company. I actually think it has done a lot of detriment to the company. And first of all, I want to say that that with my opinion of Darby Allin, I do think he needs to be the AEW champion, but this was not the right time to do it. And I also just like what WWE does is that sometimes they will change the title or they will be experimental, but usually always do it at the right time. With that being said, really, like right now is not the right time for Darby Allin to be champion. Right now, MJF should have continued all the way until Wembley Stadium. There's a reason why, like during the 1980s, there were people like Roddy Piper or the Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase, or a lot of other people that should have, been champion, but Hogan was such a big deal that they said, okay, well, you're better. He's better off with that title. Or even like with Roman Reigns, like WWE lost a lot of popularity, but one of the reasons why Roman Reigns was champion for such a long time was because they knew that he was the right champion at the right time. Or with John Cena, he was the safest person to make champion, really. That sometimes you need to just say what is the safest thing to do, really. And I think MJF, what is the safest thing to do? Because, and that's my first argument. Because honestly, like last year, the title picture was a clusterfuck. Because it started with Swerve dropping it to Bryan Danielson, and then Bryan Danielson was champion for a month, and then they gave it to John Moxley. And then when they started the Death Riders thing, they kind of had a lot of people in the Dark Order, Orange Cassidy, Private Party, like a lot of just different people show up and show out. And then the world title picture was like, who's in the world title, really? And I remember, like, I think it was Full Gear. You had John Moxley versus Orange Cassidy, a comedy wrestler. And really, the world title picture got a little bit better when you got to World's End, where it was Samoa Joe, MJF, Swerve Strickland, and Adam Page. Like, that was a great world title match. And then what you did with, MJF was that he made a lot of people go after the title. He talked to Kyle Fletcher, he talked to Kevin Knight, he talked to Brody King, he talked to Darby Allin, he talked to Andrade. So he was really that type of person that was like, it's my job to rebuild the title picture. And I feel like when he lost the titles to when he lost the title to Darby Allin, that kind of killed all of that. So I really think that that's the first argument. Is ultimately it fucks up the World Heavyweight Championship picture. And I think that the other way it fucks it up really is that with MJF, he was like, people have to go through obstacles, people have to beat people have to mean something before facing him for the AEW championship. But with Darby Allin, it's like, okay, well, if you're hot right now or you're one of my friends, I will give you a title shot because I want to have match after match after match, really. And then there's issues with that, really, because, Darby Allin versus Kevin Knight could be a main event. Darby Allin versus Brody King could be a main event of a pay-per-view. What was it? He faced Tommaso Ciampa. They had a really excellent match, but that could have been a main event of a pay-per-view, really. So they're kind of almost like giving matches away like candy. And then I like what somebody said, that which is Tommaso Ciampa versus Darby Allin was a 5-star Dave Meltzer match, but the ratings went down, really. And that's going to bring me to my second argument, is that the ratings have gone down. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. I think that I do agree with Off the Mic Sport Network, where he did say that when you look at it, there's really no story there. The story really is Darby Allin is giving away matches, really, when the story with MJF was that people have to go through obstacles and people have to do whatever it takes to face MJF. Like Swerve went from being a babyface to being a killer, and then he was like, you saw Swerve versus Brody, then Swerve. Now it's like Swerve talking to Kevin Knight saying you need to be like a killer and stuff like that, really. So, I think that would have been an interesting story with MJF as a champion. And even people were saying, too, that, what with Swerve, it was bad that they did that. You could have done Swerve versus MJF, or Swerve versus MJF at Double or Nothing would have been a really great draw, really, with a man that wants to be a killer versus MJF, really. So you have that with Swerve, then you have a Hangman Adam Page. And I like the match that they had on the Texas Death Match because it was really kind of about, in my opinion, saying that, Adam Page is just a shtick, really. And it's versus MJF who's saying, like, you know what, you're just, you're not worth it as a wrestler. Right? You're not really worth my time, but I'm going to play your game of a Texas Death Match. I think that that's an interesting story to see what type of person does Adam Page become when he can never be a champion again. With Kyle Fletcher, he needs to be somebody who breaks out to the World Heavyweight Championship picture. Like he's been the TNT pitcher too long, really. So with MJF, he would have had that. Or you look at somebody like Brody King. Like Brody King, legitimately died. He died as a tag team wrestler. Now he's in the World Heavyweight Championship picture, and that came from a squash match with MJF, really. So it's like with MJF, really. Like there's so mmany stories that can be told. Really, there's so much momentum right now, and Darby doesn't have that. And I also think, in a way, too, like the World Heavyweight Championship match with MJF was great, and the one with Darby Allin is bad. Let's talk about this. That what I mean by this is that when MJF became the AEW champion at World's End, you had a Fatal 4-Way, and the Fatal 4-Way was really to say, here are the four people that are in your World Heavyweight Championship picture, instead of just it being all over the place, instead of it not like you look at like the one with Moxley, Adam Page, Jay White, and somebody else. That wasn't a great World Heavyweight Championship match because obviously when you had that match, where's Jay White? Moxley was not really a good champion, and Adam Page can't be champion again, really. That wasn't a good World Heavyweight Championship match. But the 1 year later was great because Joe was a champion, Swerve was a champion. At that time, Hangman could become a champion again. Then you had MJF, so you had former champions to say, here's our championship picture. And who's going to walk into the following year as a champion? Is it going to be like a new year, new champion, new start? And then that's what they did. So that was good for AEW, really. And I also like what they did with the intro. They did with the set design with AEW World's End, where they had like a giant curtain to symbolize, it's the end of the year. It's the end of the Death Riders running with the title, really. We're going to really just focus on our own division. That was a great ending. But when you look at Darby Allin, all he did was really squash MJF. And it really hurt MJF a lot, really, because he already did that with Brody King. Mind you, Brody King's a big bad dude. And this one was almost like, Darby Allin going like Super Saiyan, or Darby Allin just getting plot armor, really. Like it really wasn't, it's like what a lot of my friends said, it really wasn't earned. And it really made MJF look bad and stuff like that. So that's also another thing, and it also felt like there was a lot of Darby Allin butt kissing that night. It kind of reminded me when they had James Storm become the TNA champion, because what happened with James Storm was that Robert Roode was supposed to be the TNA champion, but they changed the ending to Bound for Glory because they wanted to be unpredictable and they wanted Robert Roode to turn heel, so they kind of gave him motivation, and that wasn't really that good, really. So Kurt Angle won by cheating, and then the next thing that happened was they had a match. It was Kurt Angle versus James Storm. James Storm hits him with a super kick because Kurt Angle got injured. So they wanted to do a quick match, get Kurt Angle out of it, and then the celebration was longer than everything, really. So Robert Roode overcomes this obstacle, and James Storm has nothing, really. So it almost feels like that, really, with Darby Allin. Like, I really just don't think that, honestly, when you look at his heavyweight championship match, it wasn't competitive. It wasn't Darby Allin pushing himself to the limits. It was ultimately him going Super Saiyan, or him having MJF on the easiest difficulty setting. And a lot of people, like, who are my friends who like Darby Allin, even say the same thing. It was definitely very anticlimactic. The next thing that I would say about with Darby Allin is that I think that he should not be champion, and he should be punished, really, because he decided to climb Mount Everest. And a lot of people said, like, okay, well, last year at All In, it was supposed to be for Darby Allin to beat Jon Moxley. But you kind of look at the fact that, honestly, the Death Riders lasting so long um, was one of the reasons was because Darby Allin was selfish enough to climb Mount Everest. He cared more about climbing Mount Everest than actually being there at the company, really. So it's ultimately, he chose to do what he wanted to do, really. Instead of just saying, okay, well, the company needs me or the company can go in an interesting direction, but no, I gotta just like go off and do what I want to do. It's kind of very similar. And a lot of wrestlers do that too, where they'll just be like, okay, I got another project, so I don't care about being at the company, or I'll just use a hiatus or whatever, really. So I really think that that's another argument. And I think like maybe one of my last arguments would kind of be like, you also look at Wembley Stadium, because I think a lot of people would say a great match for Wembley Stadium is MJF versus Will Ospreay, and I understand that they're doing derailment, which means that it's going to happen, but they're going to put MJF away from the World Heavyweight Championship now. They're going to put Ospreay with the Death Riders, so that way when it happens, it feels unpredictable now because you're putting these two guys in different directions. You're taking them, you're derailing them, you're putting them in different directions. And then later on, what they're going to do is bring them back to that match, because honestly, like I think Wembley Stadium, I don't think they have like 30,000 people, and this is like a 70, 80,000 seat arena, really. So they really had to kind of make sure to say, okay, we just want to make sure we don't get embarrassed. I think the last year they went there, they got like 40,000. So they have to really, really, really do something where they say, okay, we got to keep going back to Wembley. We got to make it matter, and it has to matter. But I really just but that's one of my biggest fears is that they may do two things. They could say, okay, we're going to hold off MJF versus Ospreay, not build to that for so long that when it happens, people in London won't care as much. Or they may say, no, the best, we need to be unpredictable. We're going to do Adam Page versus Darby Allin, or we're going to do John Moxley versus Darby Allin, or Kenny Omega versus Darby Allin, or Sting versus Darby Allin, or we're gonna like do Kevin Knight versus Darby Allin. We're gonna like come up with something that people are not gonna expect. Then we're gonna have MJF versus Andrade, or we're gonna have MJF versus like MJF versus like somebody else, really. But the point of it is that I think like honestly like the title run has been like very detrimental. It's not. It's kind of killing the ratings and stuff like that. And it kind of also makes Dust Double or Nothing feel like a big clusterfuck. Like, honestly, I don't really know what's going to happen with that pay per view. But I think the Darby Allin title run has done a lot more negatives than positives.